Hello, my name's Dave Emory, and this is For the Record program number 325, The Past as Prologue. This is being recorded on September 16th of the year 2001. In King Lear, Shakespeare wrote that the past is prologue. And in the two half hours of this broadcast, number 325, we're going to be excerpting some material from recent For the Record broadcasts, which, taken in combination with one another, and even in fact separately, could be seen as perhaps a run-up to the horrifying events of the terrorist blitzkrieg of September 11th of the year 2001. Now, the first excerpt we're going to listen to is an excerpt from For the Record program number 310 from July 8th of 2001, and this concerns the appointment of Robert Mueller to be head of the F.B.I. And as you listen to the segment that you're going to be hearing, this also, by the way, is going to discuss the frustration by the State Department of the F.B.I. point man in the investigation into the bombings of the U.S.S. Cole and also of the bombings of the U.S. embassies in Africa in 1998, both of those acts attributed to Osama bin Laden. Note the frustration of John O'Neill, but note also the background of the current head of the FBI who came into office not too long before the before the 9/11 2001 terrorist blitzkrieg. Note that as a Bush Justice Department official, prosecutor, Mueller oversaw the investigations, and that belongs in quotes, into Manny Noriega, which, had it been for that situation been fully investigated, would have gone to the Iran-Contra scandal and the elder George Bush. Perhaps even more importantly, Robert Mueller that's how he pronounces his name, was in charge of the investigation into Pan Am 103, the downing of Pan Am 103. That was badly attenuated, and the evidentiary tributaries from that investigation would have gone to the Iran-Contra scandal, George Bush, and would have exposed the collaboration between the Reagan-Bush White House and the Iran-Contra team, and one of the most notorious terrorists on earth, Mansour al-Qassar. Perhaps more importantly still, Robert Mueller was in charge of the investigation into the BCCI case, which would have also gone to the Iran-Contra scandal and the elder George Bush, and as we will see, it would have stretched forward in time, quite possibly, and would have tarred the younger George Bush and a person who put forth the venture capital for Arbusto Energy, George W.'s first energy company, that fellow James R. Bath, who was the Texas business representative for the Bin Laden family. This is from For the Record program 310 from July 8th of 2001. Recently, the FBI, which has been under fire in a number of different contexts, has undergone a change of leadership. Louis Freeh, the director of the FBI, stepped down, and he has now been replaced, at least assuming that Robert Mueller's his nomination is confirmed, which in all likelihood it will be. Robert Mueller actually pronounces his name Mueller. Last name is spelled M-U-E-L-L-E-R. Mueller himself is an interesting fellow, and as head of the criminal investigation section of the Department of Justice under George I, he oversaw some very interesting cases which have connections to the Iran-Contra scandal. Oh, by the way, Rags to Riches is For the Record program number 277. I knew the number would come to me. The following is from the San Francisco Chronicle of Friday, July 6th of the year 2001. This is a chronicle story by Zachary Coyle, C-O-I-L-E, and Bob Egelko, or Egelko, E-G-E-L-K-O. Its headline, SF Prosecutor Mueller picked to lead FBI and mend its image. And in a sidebar to this article, there's discussion of some of the top cases that Mueller oversaw. It reads, while he was head of the Justice Department's Criminal Division, Robert S. Mueller III oversaw several high-profile matters. The prosecution of Panamanian strongman Manny Noriega on drug charges, the inquiry into the 1988 bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, and the BCCI investigation, a huge international fraud case. Three of these, the three that I just named, impinge directly not only on the Iran-Contra scandal, but also on the overlapping Iraq-Gate scandal. And one of the things that's significant about these cases is that had they been investigated to the extent that they might have, these almost certainly would have brought down George Bush, certainly led to his impeachment, if not his ultimate conviction on criminal charges. The lead paragraph of this story, by the way, reads, President Bush tapped Robert S. Mueller III, the U.S. attorney in San Francisco, as the new director of the F.B.I. yesterday, seeking a no-nonsense manager to repair the image of an agency accused of botching several recent high-profile cases. And we're going to chat about BCCI in a minute. More about the BCCI case. This from an article in the Chronicle the preceding day. This is from Tuesday, actually 2 days earlier. This is from the San Francisco Chronicle of Tuesday, July 3rd of the year 2001. This is an article by Stacy Finz, F-I-N-Z, of the Chronicle. It's headlined, In the Running for F.B.I. Director, subtitled, Bush Considers Low-Key SF Federal Prosecutor for Job. And of the BCCI investigation, by the way, the BCCI was called the Bank of Credit, was the abbreviation for an institution called the Bank of Credit and Commerce International. This was nicknamed the Bank for Crooks and something Crooks and something else. Anyway, Wags gave it a different name. BCCI was heavily involved not only with some of the funding of the Iran-Contra scandal, but also served as a vehicle for the repository of drug money, and also for the funds used by various terrorist groups as well. Again, it was deeply involved, the BCCI was deeply involved in the Iran-Contra scandal. Oliver North used an account with BCCI for many of his machinations, and BCCI is an institution with, as I like to say, more connections than a switchboard. More about BCCI in a minute. Skipping down in this story, from Boston, Mueller went to Washington, D.C., where he served as the head of the Justice Department's criminal division in George Bush's administration. It was there that he oversaw the prosecutions of Noriega and headed up investigation of the Bank of Credit and Commerce International scandal, a huge fraud case in which people throughout the Third World lost their life savings. By the time the BCCI probe picked up steam, several Washington power brokers were implicated, and allegations surfaced that the Justice Department was balking at the investigation because of alleged CIA links. By the way, those alleged CIA links are they're a matter of public record. Continuing, then Representative Charles Schumer, Democrat of New York, fired off a report critical of the Justice Department's treatment of the case, saying the failure to pursue wrongdoing might be because too many prominent politicians had connections to BCCI. Quote, There is possibly a cover-up or conspiracy, unquote, Schumer, now a U.S. Senator, said in 1991. Again quoting, but it is also a 50% chance that it was just ineptitude, a failure to go after white-collar crime. Well, I suspect that there was a whole lot more to it than that. Again, BCCI was centrally involved in the Iran-Contra affair. It was one of the many connections that would have undoubtedly led back to the elder George Bush, who was not only was in the loop, but was the main orchestrator of the Iran-Contra affair. The vehicle for realizing the Iran-Contra and Iraqgate machinations were the intergovernmental agency networks that were put together pursuant to the President's task force on the Vice President's task force on combating terrorism that was headed up by George Bush, and the networks that were created out of the recommendations that that task force put together were utilized by George Bush as sort of his own private intelligence service. They were the main vehicle for the realizing of both the Iran-Contra machinations and the Iraqgate machinations, and had the BCCI affair been properly investigated, it would have gone back to the elder George Bush. It also, as we're going to talk about in a minute, might have very well gone forward and tarred the current George Bush, George II, with the very same brush. I would note in a couple of different For the Record programs, For the Record program 249 and also in number 228, I went into a meeting that took place in July of 1986 between George Bush, that's the elder George Bush, and Amiram Nir Nisker, and also military intelligence agent Charles McKee, who was in charge of a group of U.S. military intelligence operatives who were in the Middle East looking to free the hostages that had been held as part of the imbroglio in the Iran-Contra affair. The McKee team died in the bombing of Pan Am 103, and indeed it has been established that the U.S. State Department had advance warning that a Pan Am plane was going to be blown up. And indeed the evidence in the bombing of Pan Am 103 not only does not point exclusively to Libya, but the larger view of the investigation points in the direction of Mansour al-Qassar, a Syrian terrorist and weapons trafficker who was a main operative in the Iran-Contra affair, and who was alleged by the Pan Am 103 insurance investigators report to have been the principal executor of the Pan Am 103 bombing. That Pan Am insurance investigators report also alleges that the handlers for Mansour al-Qassar had advance warning that the bomb was going to go off, and that they deliberately prevented the flight from being canceled, and therefore bore responsibility for the bombing of Pan Am 103 and the elimination of the McKee team, who were alleged by the insurance investigators report to have come across the connections between the Iran-Contra players and Mansour al-Qassar. I believe it was Oliver Buck Revel's son. Oliver Revel was a former F.B.I. official also involved with the investigations of Iran-Contra, and some would maintain that he helped to attenuate some of those investigations. But Revel's son, I believe, was going to be on Pan Am 103. He was one of a number of people who was able to cancel his seat on that particular flight. The McKee team were not so lucky, and again it is alleged that alleged in the Pan Am insurance investigation report that the McKee team had come across the connections between Mansour al-Qassar and the Iran-Contra players, and that they were headed back to the United States to, among other things, blow the whistle on that particular connection. It's been established and again discussed in For the Record 228 and 249 that George Bush was in a meeting at the King David Hotel in Jerusalem in July of 1986, at which the aforementioned Charles McKee and also Amiram Nir Nisker, one of the Israeli players in the Iran-Contra affair, discussed some of the machinations. Lawrence Walsh, the aforementioned Iran-Contra special prosecutor, was interested in investigating this particular meeting. It was one of the areas of stonewalling that helped to frustrate his investigation, and again, had that particular meeting been properly investigated, it might very well have led to the impeachment, perhaps even the criminal conviction of the elder George Bush. Certainly, Charles McKee was present at that meeting, and his death in Pan Am 103, or on the Pan Am 103 flight, precluded any testimony that he might have given either about that meeting or about the alleged discovery of the Mansour al-Qassar Iran-Contra connection. Manny Noriega's involvement with Iran-Contra and with the Bush milieu, the elder George Bush milieu, is a matter of public record. And one of the things that's interesting about the BCCI connection is that one of the people involved with the milieu of the BCCI was a fellow named James R. Bath, who by his own account allegedly was recruited by the elder George Bush into the Central Intelligence Agency and assigned to babysit some very wealthy Saudi Arabian clients. James R. Bath put up approximately 5% of the working capital that went to found Arbusto Energy, George Bush's first oil company. That's George II W's first oil company. And as we've discussed in numerous broadcasts, For the Record program number 256, the aforementioned number 277, broadcast number 249, and For the Record program number 186, the acquaintances of James R. Bath at the time said that he had very little money of his own, so in all probability, the capital that went to found, that portion of the capital that went to found Arbusto Energy probably came from James R. Bath's wealthy Saudi Arabian clients, who included the Bin Laden family, because James R. Bath was the Texas business representative for the Bin Laden family. Osama bin Laden is the terrorist extraordinaire, and his